God's chosen one keeps silent about what is about to happen. When there is a very important time spiritually, there is often a call to action, contemplation, or silence. God's chosen people are often entrusted with insights and revelations that are not meant for public disclosure. Keeping silence in these moments is an act of obedience, demonstrating faith in God's perfect timing and plan. Speaking prematurely may disrupt divine arrangements or cause confusion among others. Sometimes silence is a form of protection. Sharing too much about divine plans may make them vulnerable to ridicule, misunderstanding, or opposition. You have been chosen by God for His mission, and God has entrusted you with His blessing. If the chosen people reveal too much, they risk undermining the element of faith that God wants to develop in others. The spiritual realm is active, and adversaries are always looking for ways to hinder God's work. Speaking openly about divine plans may give the enemy information to destroy them. Silence is a weapon of spiritual warfare, which keeps the enemy in the dark. While silence is important, there will come a time when God will call His chosen ones to speak. At that moment, their words will have divine authority and power, which will bring about change and clarity. Staying silent until that time ensures that their message is perfectly aligned with God's will. So, are you ready for this change? Before that, if you want to give your feedback to the universe, then you can send feedback to the universe by subscribing to the channel. And if you are truly a chosen person, only then will you be able to watch this video till the end. Otherwise, your soul will close this video. Before proceeding to the video, type 999 in the comment and join the flow of energy. Silence as obedience to divine will. Silence can be a profound act of obedience and trust in God's divine will. There are times when God reveals insights or places a special understanding in our hearts that should not be shared immediately or at all. In such moments, choosing to remain silent is not a sign of weakness or uncertainty. It is an expression of trust in God's perfect plan and timing. Imagine that a special secret or responsibility has been entrusted to you by someone you deeply respect. You would handle that trust carefully, understanding the importance of timing and context. Similarly, when God speaks to us or gives us revelations, He may not want us to immediately act on them or share them with others. Instead, He may ask us to keep them to ourselves, pray and wait until He makes it clear what we should do. This waiting period is often part of His greater purpose, shaping us and preparing others for what is to come. The Bible reminds us in Ecclesiastes 3:1 that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. This verse teaches us the importance of recognizing God's timing in all things. If we act too quickly before the right season, we can cause confusion or disrupt God's plan. Speaking prematurely can cause others to misunderstand or misuse the revelation, causing more harm than good. In this sense, silence is not passive, but active. It requires discipline, patience, and a deep trust in God's wisdom. There may be a temptation to speak, especially if we feel excited or burdened by what we know. But part of spiritual maturity is learning to resist that urge and submit our timing to God. Silence becomes an act of worship, acknowledging that God's ways are higher than our ways and that His plan is unfolding perfectly, even when we don't fully understand it. Consider Mary, the mother of Jesus, for example. When the angel Gabriel told her that she would give birth to God's Son, she didn't rush to tell it to everyone. Instead, she treasured these things in her heart and pondered them quietly. Luke 2:19. Her silence was not due to fear, but to reverence and a deep understanding of the seriousness of what God was doing. In our lives, silence can also be a way to protect others. Not everyone is ready to accept certain truths, and sharing too early can cause unnecessary anxiety, doubt, or confusion. By waiting for God's time, we let Him prepare the hearts and minds of those who need to hear the message. Ultimately, silence as obedience means trusting that God knows best. It's about stepping back and letting Him lead, knowing that when the time is right, He will guide us to speak or act in a way that will glorify Him and bless others. In that quiet obedience, we find peace and alignment with His will. The power of secrets. Secrets have a unique ability to draw people closer to God. When chosen individuals refrain from revealing what they know, they preserve the sanctity of divine mysteries. This restraint invites others to discover God for themselves, thereby promoting personal spiritual growth. When certain individuals are chosen to encounter divine truths or insights, they are often faced with a unique responsibility, knowing when to share and when to withhold. It is not about secrecy for the sake of secrecy, but about honoring the sanctity of what has been revealed. Some truths are too precious to be revealed in a hasty or incorrect way. By choosing restraint, these individuals protect the sanctity of God's mysteries, allowing others to explore and discover God in their own time and way. Imagine if every answer about God was readily available, explained, and fully understood. The journey of faith could lose its depth and wonder. Mystery plays a vital role in keeping our hearts humble and open. It reminds us that God is far greater than anything we can fully understand. When we encounter the unknown, it awakens a hunger within us, a desire to explore, question, and draw closer to God. This process is not just about finding answers, it is about changing our hearts. Consider the timing and purpose of revelation. God, in His infinite wisdom, knows when we are ready to receive certain truths. Sometimes, if knowledge comes too quickly, we may not be able to fully understand or appreciate it. It can overwhelm us or even lead us in the wrong direction. But when revelation comes with God's perfect timing, it becomes life-changing. It meets us exactly where we are, providing clarity, comfort, or conviction when we need it most. This is why patience and faith are so important in our spiritual lives. When we encounter mystery, it can be tempting to demand answers or be frustrated by the unknown. But often God uses those moments to shape us, to teach us perseverance, faith, and dependence on Him. The purpose of mystery is not to discourage us, but to draw us more deeply into relationship. It is an invitation to trust that God knows what He is doing, even when we don't fully understand. For those who have been entrusted with divine insight, their restraint in sharing is not to deny others access to God. Instead, it is an act of wisdom and love. By withholding themselves, they give others the opportunity to discover God for themselves. Such discovery fosters spiritual growth, which cannot be done by simply receiving information. It makes the journey personal as individuals grapple with their own questions, doubts, and discoveries. Mystery is a gift. It reminds us of the grandeur of God, the depth of His love, and the beauty of the journey toward Him. It teaches us to be patient, to trust His timing, and to cherish moments of revelation. Through mystery, we get closer to the heart of God, where faith becomes more than knowledge. It becomes a relationship, protecting the mission. Sometimes silence is a form of protection. Sharing too much about divine plans can make them vulnerable to ridicule, misunderstanding, or opposition. There are moments in life when silence is not just about withholding words. It is about wisdom, discretion, and protection, especially when it comes to matters of deep importance, such as divine plans or sacred missions. It may be important to keep certain things hidden for a while. It is not about being secret for the sake of secrets. It is about making sure that what is precious is not misunderstood, attacked, or sabotaged before it is revealed. In these cases, silence becomes a shield, a way to protect what matters most. Throughout history, we see examples of this. One of the most striking examples is found in the life of Jesus. Time and again, after performing a miracle or healing someone, he would instruct them not to tell anyone. For example, in Mark 1:44, after healing a man with leprosy, Jesus said, "See that you tell no one about this." This may seem surprising. Why would Jesus not want the world to know about such incredible deeds? Wouldn't spreading the news draw more people to him? The answer lies in the delicate balance of timing and purpose. Jesus knew that his mission on earth was unfolding according to a divine plan. Every step had a purpose, and every moment had its time. Premature exposure could have led to misunderstandings, unnecessary conflict, or even the wrong kind of attention. People would have focused on the miracles rather than on the deeper message of his mission, the salvation of humanity and reconciliation with God. By keeping certain aspects of his work secret, Jesus was able to protect the integrity of his mission and ensure that it proceeded in accordance with God's timing. This principle applies to our lives too. There are times when we feel a strong purpose or calling to something important, but not every moment is the right time to share it. Revealing too much too soon can create unnecessary challenges. People may not understand the vision, or they may even resist it out of fear, doubt, or jealousy. Being silent in these moments gives the mission a chance to grow and strengthen without interference. It gives us time to prepare, listen to God's guidance, and act wisely. It is important to recognize that silence does not mean fear or avoidance. It is about stewardship. When something is valuable or sacred, it must be handled with care. Speaking too quickly or sharing too widely can diminish its power or make it vulnerable to attack. But by exercising restraint, we honor the mission and ensure it is revealed in a way that maximizes its impact. Also, this kind of silence requires trust. It means trusting that God's plan will come true at the right time, even if we don't fully understand the need for delay or discretion. It's the practice of surrender, letting go of our desire to control the narrative and instead letting God guide it. Protecting mission through silence is an act of faith. It's about recognizing the value of what God has entrusted to us and being willing to protect it until its time comes for it to shine. Whether in the life of Jesus or in our own lives, silence can be a powerful tool for preserving sacred things and ensuring that God's plans unfold exactly as they are intended. Avoiding pride and arrogance, being chosen by God for a special purpose, is a profound and humbling experience. It is an incredible reminder of His love and trustworthiness, but it also brings a challenge. How can we handle such a calling without becoming proud? The temptation to share our experiences, talk about what God has done through us, or seek recognition for the role we play is very real. After all, being chosen by God can feel special, and it is. But this feeling of being isolated can sometimes become a slippery slope towards self-importance if we're not careful. This is where silence becomes a powerful act of humility. By choosing to remain silent about certain things, we protect ourselves from the trap of pride. It's not about denying the importance of what God is doing, it's about focusing on Him rather than on ourselves. When we remain silent, we make room for the glory of God rather than seeking glory for ourselves. It's a way of saying, it's not about me, it's about Him. Humility is at the core of this discipline. When we acknowledge that all the good we've done is ultimately by God's power and not our own, it changes our approach to our own calling. Silence becomes a way to guard our hearts, reminding us that we are merely instruments in His hands. The more we speak about what we've done, the easier it is to forget that it's God working through us. Silence helps us stay grounded, to remember that the story is always about Him, not us. Jesus Himself exemplified this kind of humility. Despite being God's son, he often avoided drawing attention to himself. He didn't seek recognition or praise. Instead, he directed people to the Father. When performing miracles or teaching profound truths, Jesus was careful not to draw attention to his actions. His silence and restraint showed that his mission was to serve others and glorify God, not to seek personal accolades. In our own lives, the practice of silence can also protect us from the subtle but dangerous pull of ego. It's natural to want others to see the good we're doing or acknowledge our sacrifices, but seeking recognition in this way can take our focus away from God. Keeping quiet about our spiritual accomplishments or divine callings is not about hiding them. It's about letting God's light shine in a way that doesn't focus on us. Silence also teaches us self-control, which is a discipline that strengthens our character. It reminds us that we don't need the approval or validation of others to know that we're walking in God's purpose. When we resist the urge to boast or seek attention, our trust grows that God sees and knows everything we do. His approval is enough. Silence is a reflection of deep humility. It acknowledges that God is the source of every good thing in our lives and that only He deserves the glory. By choosing silence, we keep our hearts pure, free from the distractions of pride, and focused on what really matters, honoring God and fulfilling His purpose with a spirit of gratitude and humility. Fostering faith among others. Faith is one of the most beautiful aspects of our relationship with God. It's the foundation of trust, the bridge between the seen and unseen, and the assurance that God is working even when we don't fully understand. But faith can only grow when we are invited to lean on God rather than having every detail laid out for us. This is why silence at times plays such a vital role in fostering faith among others. It creates space for trust to flourish, for people to seek God personally, and for their relationship with Him to deepen. When God's plans are at work, He often doesn't reveal everything all at once. This isn't because He wants to keep us in the dark. It's because the journey of faith requires us to step forward, even when we can't see the whole picture. If someone who has been entrusted with divine insight shares too much too soon, it can unintentionally take away the opportunity for others to experience that trust. Instead of turning to God for guidance, people might begin to rely on human explanations, which can weaken the personal connection God desires with each of us. Consider the nature of faith, as described in Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Faith is built on trusting God's character, His promises, and His timing. It's not about having every answer in advance. It's about believing that God is good and that He will fulfill His plans in the right way and at the right time. When someone remains silent about certain divine truths or plans, it can encourage others to seek that same confidence and assurance directly from God. Jesus often demonstrated this principle during His ministry. He didn't always explain everything to His disciples or the crowds in detail. Instead, He spoke in parables or left certain things unsaid, allowing people to wrestle with the meaning and seek understanding for themselves. This wasn't a lack of clarity on His part. It was an intentional way of nurturing their faith. By not revealing everything at once, Jesus invited people to engage deeply, to question and to trust in God's wisdom. In our own lives, we can see how silence can encourage faith in others. When we hold back from explaining every detail of a situation or a spiritual insight, we give others the chance to turn to God for their answers. We create space for them to grow in their trust and relationship with Him. It's not about withholding for the sake of secrecy, but about fostering an environment where faith can take root and flourish. Silence also reminds us of an important truth. God's plans are bigger than any one person. When we step back and let God work in His way and timing, we allow others to see Him more clearly. If we're always explaining or stepping in, we might unintentionally block their view of God's hand in their lives. Silence becomes an act of surrender, trusting that God will reveal Himself to others in the way they need most. Fostering faith through silence is about pointing people toward God, not ourselves. It's about stepping aside so they can experience His presence, guidance, and love in a personal and transformative way. Faith grows strongest when it's nurtured by trust in the unseen, and silence can be a powerful tool in helping others take that leap of faith. Spiritual warfare and silence. In the spiritual realm, battles are constantly being waged. Though we may not always see it with our physical eyes, the Bible reminds us that forces of good and evil are at work, influencing the world around us. Ephesians 6:12 explains it clearly. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Understanding this reality changes how we approach our lives, especially when it comes to matters of divine plans and revelations. One of the most powerful tools in spiritual warfare is silence. It may not seem like a weapon at first glance, but choosing to remain quiet about certain things can protect God's work from interference. When we speak too openly about divine plans, we risk exposing them to opposition from spiritual adversaries. The enemy is always on the lookout for ways to disrupt, delay, or destroy what God is doing. By practicing silence, we keep sensitive matters hidden, preventing unnecessary vulnerabilities. Think of silence like a shield in the spiritual battlefield. When we guard our words, we prevent the enemy from gaining a foothold. The devil and his forces do not have access to the omniscience of God. They rely on what is spoken, seen, and revealed to carry out their schemes. If we share too much, whether out of excitement, pride, or even a desire to encourage others, we might unintentionally give the enemy information to use against us or the mission God has entrusted to us. Silence, therefore, becomes a strategic act of wisdom and protection. Even Jesus demonstrated the importance of discretion in spiritual warfare. Before significant moments in his ministry, he often withdrew to pray in solitude, keeping his plans between himself and the Father. He also advised his disciples to be cautious, reminding them to be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Matthew 10:16. This balance of wisdom and purity shows that while we are called to live in the light, we must also recognize the importance of guarding what is sacred in the face of opposition. Silence also allows us to focus on God's power rather than the enemy's tactics. When we refrain from speaking too openly, we place our trust fully in God's ability to carry out His plans without interference. It's an act of surrender and faith, acknowledging that God is in control and that His timing is perfect. By staying silent, we demonstrate our confidence that He will accomplish His purposes despite any opposition. Furthermore, silence is not passive. It's an active discipline that requires strength and self-restraint. It's easy to want to share what God is doing, especially when we're excited or passionate. But wisdom reminds us that not every moment is the right one for speaking. Sometimes holding back is the most loving and faithful thing we can do, not out of fear, but out of a desire to protect what God is building. In the end, silence in spiritual warfare is about aligning ourselves with God's strategies. It's about guarding what He has entrusted to us and trusting Him to reveal things in His perfect way and time. By practicing silence, we minimize vulnerability to spiritual attacks and ensure that the enemy is kept in the dark. It's a simple yet powerful way to protect God's work, allowing His plans to unfold without unnecessary obstacles. Building inner strength and patience. Silence, especially in the context of divine revelation, is not an easy thing to practice. It requires more than simply holding back words. It demands a deep reservoir of inner strength, patience, and trust in God. When someone is entrusted with a glimpse of God's plans or a sense of His purpose, the natural urge is often to share it. But choosing to remain silent, to wait for God's perfect timing, is a discipline that shapes the heart and builds spiritual maturity. At first glance, silence may appear passive, as if it's about doing nothing. But in reality, it's an active and deliberate choice. It takes effort to resist the temptation to speak, especially when excitement, curiosity, or even frustration is bubbling inside. Silence requires us to trust that God knows what He's doing, even when we don't fully understand. It's a way of saying, "God, I believe your timing is better than mine. I will wait." This kind of waiting isn't idle. It's a refining process that God uses to prepare His chosen ones for greater responsibilities. Like gold being purified in fire, silence helps to burn away impatience, pride, and impulsiveness. It teaches us to lean on God's wisdom instead of our own understanding, which is an essential quality for anyone called to serve in His kingdom. The ability to wait and trust in the unseen builds character and strength, preparing us for the challenges and blessings ahead. Patience is a central part of this journey. When God gives us insight into His plans, it's often only a piece of the puzzle. He doesn't always reveal the full picture right away, because the process of waiting is just as important as the destination. In that waiting, we learn to rely on Him, to seek His guidance, and to grow in faith. This builds a kind of spiritual endurance that can't be developed any other way. Jesus Himself modeled this kind of strength and patience. Throughout His ministry, He often waited for the right moment to act or speak. He didn't rush to reveal His identity or explain every aspect of His mission. Instead, He trusted the Father's timing and allowed events to unfold according to God's plan. Even in moments of silence, Jesus was actively demonstrating His trust in God and His willingness to wait for the appointed time. For those who are called to this discipline, silence becomes a training ground for greater faith and deeper intimacy with God. It's an opportunity to surrender control, to quiet the noise of the world, and to listen to God's voice more clearly. In that stillness, we find strength we didn't know we had, and discover that waiting on God is never wasted time. Silence also teaches us humility. It reminds us that the plans belong to God, not us, and that our role is to be faithful stewards of what He entrusts to us. This perspective helps us approach our calling with a sense of awe and responsibility, rather than entitlement or urgency. The discipline of staying silent refines us from the inside out. It equips us with the patience, strength, and trust needed to carry out God's purposes in the way He intends. It's a reminder that silence is not weakness. It's a powerful, active choice to rely on God, to wait for His perfect timing, and to prepare our hearts for the greater things He has in store. The right time to speak. There's a season for everything, and that includes the moment when silence gives way to speech. While there are times when staying silent is essential to protect God's plans or build our inner strength, there will inevitably come a moment when God calls us to speak. At that time, the words we share won't just be ordinary. They will carry divine authority and power, bringing transformation to those who hear them. Waiting for this moment ensures that what we say aligns with God's perfect will and timing. The discipline of silence is a preparation phase. It refines our character, deepens our reliance on God, and helps us develop a sensitivity to His voice. But this silence isn't meant to last forever. When the appointed time arrives, God equips His chosen ones to speak with clarity and conviction. The words they utter aren't born from impulse or human wisdom. They come from a place of divine guidance, ensuring they accomplish the purpose God has for them. Consider the example of Moses. When God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses initially hesitated, feeling unqualified and unsure of his ability to speak. Yet when the time came, God empowered Moses to confront Pharaoh with boldness. The timing of Moses' words was critical. They carried the authority of God and set into motion the liberation of an entire nation. If Moses had spoken too soon or on his own, the impact would not have been the same. Similarly, Jesus often waited for the right moment to reveal profound truths. He didn't rush to proclaim his identity or mission. Instead, he acted in perfect harmony with the Father's timing. When he did speak, his words carried the power to heal, transform, and bring life. This example teaches us that speaking at the right time, under God's direction, magnifies the effectiveness of our message. For us, trusting in God's timing can be challenging. We may feel a strong urge to share what we know or act on what we've been shown. But patience is key. When we wait for God to prompt us, we ensure that our words are not only timely, but also impactful. Speaking prematurely can dilute the message or cause confusion, while waiting allows us to deliver it with the weight and authority God intends. When the moment comes to speak, God doesn't leave us to figure it out on our own. He promises to provide the words we need. As Jesus assured his disciples, "Do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you." Matthew 10:19-20. This promise reminds us that God not only determines the timing, but also equips us with the wisdom and courage to fulfill his purpose. The audience will also be ready. When God calls us to speak, he ensures that the hearts of those who need to hear are prepared to receive the message. This alignment, God's timing, our obedience, and the readiness of the audience creates the perfect conditions for transformation to take place. In the end, the right time to speak isn't about our timing, it's about God's. It's about trusting that he knows the best moment to reveal his truth and using us as his vessels. By staying silent until that time, we honor his wisdom, align ourselves with his will, and position ourselves to be part of something far greater than we could accomplish on our own. When the moment arrives, we can speak with confidence, knowing that God has prepared us, the message, and those who need to hear it. Conclusion. For God's chosen ones, silence is not an act of fear or passivity, but a profound expression of faith, obedience, and wisdom. By staying silent about what is about to happen, they honor God's plans, protect the mission, and prepare themselves and others for the appointed time. Embrace the discipline of silence, trusting that God's will shall be fulfilled in his perfect way and time.